All right, so the third video that I want to make and I want to offer to you all as it relates to, again, kind of like getting comfortable with various terms, getting comfortable with various outlooks here as it relates just, again, kind of like having a whole bag of terms to use, right? We've got a kind of a brief understanding of spirits. We've got a brief understanding of like, well, all types of alcohol, beer, wine, various liquors. We've kind of like worked within spirit. We've worked within like what distilling means. But now I want to talk, and this might seem like a bit silly and a bit, I don't know, elementary, but I think it's important for a course like this to talk about like non-alcoholic specific terms, right? And what I mean by that is like these terms as they relate more kind of societally, social, or look at the effects of alcohol, etc. Okay? So not necessarily talking about the substance of alcohol itself or even the process as it comes to like distillation or distilling. But like these words that again, it might seem a bit silly to unpack, but I think it's important to have in our bag, in our collective terminology bag. So the first one is sober. Okay? So when someone says that they're staying sober or they are sober, like that definition is not affected by alcohol, not drunk. Okay? So that's like definition one, is not affected by alcohol, not drunk. Supplemental definition is serious, sensible, and solemn. Serious, sensible, and solemn. Okay? And we're actually going to talk in mid-March about kind of the nature of sobriety. Like what does it mean to be a sober self? Like when are we sober? When are we inebriated? When are we influenced? Because one of the arguments that I think that I think is interesting in sobriety is like when I have a cup of coffee, I am definitely different than I was prior to the cup of coffee. Like this is going to affect me in ways that change how I think about myself, how I think about my engagement with the world. So potentially, like, it's important to think about, like, well, am I actually, like, sober? Like, the definition here says not affected by alcohol, not drunk. So, in that capacity, yes. But also, like, serious, sensible, and solemn. Like, when I have coffee, I'm not necessarily, I'm serious, I guess, right? But I'm not kind of in that, like, very, like, very reverent kind of way of serious, sensible, and solemn. So, anyway, interesting to think about the notion of sobriety. The next kind of like, if we think of this on a continuum maybe, or a spectrum, right? And I'm moving my hands left to right, but I think it appears probably right to left to you. So we have sober on one side of like the scale. And then we have buzzed, right? That, I'm a little buzzed. I'm a little buzzed, or slightly drunk, tipsy, okay? So, and again, this is all going to vary depending on one's tolerance, if one consumes alcohol, if one doesn't consume alcohol, to what degree does one consume alcohol, yada, yada, yada. But buzz, right? Like slightly drunk, okay? Tipsy, okay? And I always think that there's like, again, if we like work within the metaphor, there's something to be said here. So here's like my red water bottle, right? And like if I'm tipsy, like going back and forth, like who knows which way I'm going to go. Like if I have another drink, I'm going to maybe completely fall, like not, if I have another couple of drinks, maybe I completely fall over, right? And I'm like out for the count, right? But if I'm tipsy, I'm just kind of like hanging out here in the middle, feeling maybe a little jolly, feeling a little slightly buzzed, right? But if I also stop drinking, then, I'm going to stand up maybe a little more straight. Like, I don't know, if you work within the metaphor like tipsiness, maybe it's mildly kind of interesting to entertain, okay? And then we have drunk, okay? And as a verb, the past participle of drink. So again, grammatically, that makes sense. We think of like, okay, right? I took a drink, now I have drunk all my water, right? So again, not all too kind of like concerned with alcohol. But as an adjective, drunk is affected by alcohol to the extent of losing control over one's faculties or behavior. Affected by alcohol to the extent of losing control over one's faculties or behavior. So again, this idea, and again, if we think of like, the tipsiness, right, and you're kind of like here in the middle, and then all of a sudden, you have 2 more drinks or a couple shots, right, you're kind of out for the count, right? You kind of like go beyond having control over yourself. Okay? And so, again, this looks different for different people. One's tolerance is undoubtedly going to influence, what that looks like. But affected by the alcohol to the extent of losing control over one's faculties or behaviors. And then 1.1, drunk with, overcome with strong emotion. And sometimes you hear you hear drunk in love, right? Like you see people that maybe are starting like a new relationship, or they've been in it for a couple of months, and they just seem like saturated, like awash in love and romance. Like they're drunk with this feeling, this emotion. And so again, that applies here, right? Like this idea that thinking, strong emotion, and maybe if we can, like connect that with the definition of spirit from just a moment ago, right? So the idea that if I'm drinking, I become, overtaken in an emotional or emotive state. And again, spirit is released, right? Energy is released, perhaps. Okay. Inebriate, as a verb, makes someone drunk. As an adjective, drunk, intoxicated. Intoxicate, cause someone to lose control of their faculties or behavior, usually with alcohol, drink, or drug. So inebriate and intoxicate, and again, this idea of being intoxicated, I think we gravitate to thinking about it in terms of alcohol, but also if you are inebriated or intoxicated with other substances, right, then your faculties and your behavior is going to be lessened. If not, you will lose control of that. Okay. So with all this on the table, what might be putting together the phrase is the philosophy of alcohol, right? So we have our terms from last week, philosophy, philosophical terms, and now we have terms from this week, alcohol. So what might that mean? What might this look like, right? And this is going to be part of our process going forward, is thinking about the nature of putting these pieces together, working with these terms to, again, unpack a whole array of ways that these two topics intersect, right? And also, I think, engage with each other. So I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you paying attention. I hope that you all have a great rest of your Tuesday, and then we will take up on Thursday, if I'm thinking correctly, with subjective and objective evaluations. So see you then.